celery. Raw celery. It's 95% water, 3% carbohydrates, and like 0.7% protein. 3.5 ounces of this has 16 calories. You can eat the stalks, the leaves, you can eat the seeds, you can grind it up to make salt. So Michigan's actually the second largest producer of celery in the United States, a far second to California. And we're at Celery Flats in Portage, Michigan. I'm Chuck.
I'm Poppins.
The channel's Restless Viking. Let's go on a walk and talk. Celery Flats is a big park here in Portage, Michigan, and it's got a really nice open air pavilion. And they have some really nice bathrooms, apparently.
They advertise them. They're heated, and they're open year round.
So the story starts 17,000 years ago when the glacier had come down into lower Michigan, but it stopped just 70 miles north of Kalamazoo County and 40 miles to the west, and it kind of sandwiched Kalamazoo County in the middle. And it left a bunch of water there, which became very mucky because underneath that muck was a layer of clay. And that watery muck is perfect for growing celery. And that laid the foundation for Kalamazoo and Portage to become the Celery City to the world.
This grange was built in 1931 and moved here to this location in 1990.
And there's a few stories as to how celery was started in the Kalamazoo area. And the first one was a Scotsman. In 1856, George Taylor brought some seeds from his native Scotland over into Kalamazoo, and he planted a few of them. And the variety that he planted was actually wild, and it was sweeter and softer than the celery that we eat today. But George decided it would be a good idea to talk the Burdick Hotel into offering it on their menu, and then he would give it to them for free. And George was right, because the public became really interested in this new vegetable. And then the next year he planted an acre of the crop, and they say it took off from there. But that's not the only story.
Then in 1866, Cornelius Bruin came here from the Netherlands, and he saw some of the plants on the corner of Cedar and Southwestnage. He asked if he could have some seeds. Sir Cornelius planted these seeds. Like 1 little tablespoon of seeds can grow 10,000 stalks. And celery became a thing. And this is the second story of how the celery industry took off. So Dutch immigrants started working in these fields, in these mucky fields. They wore wooden shoes. Even their horses had wooden paddles secured to their horseshoes. So this Dutch barn had been built in the early 1900s. It became a theater in the 1940s on Millam Avenue, and then moved here.
So the Kalamazoo variety of celery was much different than the Pascal celery that we eat today. It was actually yellowish or white and much sweeter.
It was sweeter because they used to blanch it. At 8 weeks of growth, they put 2 boards on each side of the stalk to prevent the sun from hitting it, and this reduced the chlorophyll and it made it sweeter. In 1984, this amazing outdoor pavilion was built.
So celery was being grown in Kalamazoo, and the popularity was growing. And Kalamazoo had a pretty good freight system set up by railroad, so they were shipping it out all over the country. By 1871, the amount of freight being shipped from Kalamazoo was only second in the state to Detroit, and that was because of celery. And by the 1920s, Kalamazoo was shipping in celery from Florida to package and ship out, making it a year-round worldwide celery producer.
And in 1910, 6.5 pages of the directory were devoted to celery growers. Schoolhouse District Number 8 was built in 1856 and used until 1947. It was moved here to be part of the park.
Interestingly, I think the city, or maybe some nonprofits, I'm not really sure who, but they have spent a lot of time and effort getting historical buildings due to development and bringing them here so that they can live out their lives as really nice restored buildings.
You can rent these buildings too for parties and events.
And comment in the comments below if you'd like us to throw a party in like the old Grange, the dusty old Grange, or the schoolhouse, or even Stewart House. Celery production became so prevalent in the city that by 1936, there were vendors marketing it on the streets. And if you pulled in by train, salesmen would get on the train and start trying to sell celery to anyone on the train. So you take our point, of course, celery was a big deal here. And even though we lived here, we had no idea it was that big of a deal. So the celery industry started to decline by the 1930s. And there's a few reasons. The first one, they say, is because paper became the dominating industry in the 1920s. In fact, in that time, 25% of the workforce in Kalamazoo was employed by the paper industry. So the paper making process requires a lot of water. And as we know, celery was grown in the mucky fields of Kalamazoo, and those paper industries stabbed some pretty deep wells, which actually lowered the water table and made it difficult to grow celery.
Another reason for the collapse of the celery industry is a blight that took hold in the 1930s due to a lack of rotating crops. The Stewart House is the oldest in Portage. It was built in 1846 and it was lived in by the senator for Michigan, Charles Stewart. It is rumored to be part of the Underground Railroad.
Now, we don't know for sure if the land that Celery Flats is on actually grew celery, but I did find a map from 1910 that has the Kalamazoo Gardening Company on this land. So when celery failed, a lot of the celery farmers started planting flowers. So from that history, maybe this was actually used for celery. And if anyone from the Portage area knows, please comment below. The history of the Kalamazoo Portage area, my friends, is almost as crisp and refreshing as a stalk of celery. And I sincerely wish that I had the opportunity to take a sample of the Kalamazoo celery. So if anyone still grows that heirloom variety, comment below. From Celery Flats in Portage, Michigan, I'm Chuck.
I'm Poppins.
The channel's Restless Viking. Thanks for taking a walk and talk with us.